Welcome to your third video lesson, Perfect Squares and Square Roots. And as I said, this is video lesson number 3. For today's lesson, you will need the notes you were given in class. Look for TOC number 3. It will say Perfect Squares and Square Roots at the top. A pencil or pen to take notes, and something with color just so you can add some interest in your note-taking and for some of the things we're going to be doing. At the top of TOC number 3, you'll notice that you have some boxes and it's asking for the area of each square. So if you look at the first example, we have one single box, and we know that one single box, the area is simply just 1. Underneath that, you have a 1 with a smaller 2. What that means is 1 squared, or 1 to the power of 2, which simply means that you have a box that's 1 unit tall and 1 unit wide, or 1 times 1. And that yields or gives us an area of 1. In the second example, we've got a box that's 2 units tall and also 2 units wide, which means that we would have 2 to the second power, or 2 squared, which is also written as 2 times 2, and we know that 2 times 2 is 4. In the third example, we're continuing the pattern. Now we have 3 units tall and 3 units wide, and that would give us 3 times 3, and if we were to count all those little tiny squares, we would know that 3 squared, or 3 to the second power, is 9. If we continue looking at the pattern, now we've got a box that is 4 units tall and 4 units wide, or 4 times 4. If we were to count all those boxes, we would know that 4 squared is 16. For the next one, we have a square that is 5 units tall and 5 units wide, which means we are taking 5 times 5 to find the total number of squares inside the square, or the total number of units inside the square, and that would be 25. With all of these examples, you're finding the area, but you're also finding the perfect square for those numbers. For the next example, we did not fill in the boxes for you because we wanted you to see that it is 6 units tall and 6 units wide. And if you were to continue those boxes and making those boxes, you would have a square that is 6 units tall, 6 units wide, and that's the same as 6 times 6. And we shorten it by writing 6 with a little tiny exponent of 2, and that would give us 36. For the last example, we're going to continue drawing those shapes in, and we would get a square that is 7 units tall and 7 units wide, which means we're going to take 7 times 7 to find the area, and we shorten that abbreviation or that notation by saying 7 squared, and we know that 7 times 7 is 49. There's a little box off to the right, and you can use a calculator for this if you don't know your math facts, but you continue the pattern. So if they said, what would be the area of a square with the following side lengths? Remember, a square has equal sides on the length and the width. So for 8, that's the same as saying 8 times 8. And a little saying that I like to remember to help me remember the 8s is I ate and I ate and I got sick on the floor. 8 times 8 is 64. 9, if I had a square that had a length and width of 9, that is the same as 9 times 9. And I don't have any funny, cute saying for that one, but 9 times 9 is 81. So 9 squared would give you an area of 81, or the perfect square of 81. 10 times 10, whoops. Use your calculator and try the rest of the problems. These will be on a quiz later, and you need to know actually all the way up to 20 squared, and we're going to go over those in just a minute. Pause the video, try them on your own, and this will be on your homework quiz. Welcome back. We're going to do some quick vocabulary terms, so you will need a pen or pencil, and you can add some color here as well. So the vocabulary terms you have to know is square root and perfect square, and these are inverse operations of each other. So let's start with the square root. That is the number being multiplied by itself to form a perfect square. It is the length of one side of the square. So just like we had those examples before, when we had 1 squared, or with the little tiny 2, the length of each side was 1, or the big number. So that is the square root. The perfect square means that's the product, or the answer you get when you multiply a number times itself. This is also the area, or the number of units that were inside the square. So the square root will be the length of the side on the outside of the square, and the perfect square would be all the units inside. Another way to remember it is the square root is smaller than the perfect square, because the perfect square is the product when you multiply. So there's a couple challenge questions down at the bottom just to help you think through the vocabulary terms. The first one says, what is the perfect square of 25? So that means you're taking 25. And with perfect square, that means you're looking for the product of when you take 25. And if I were to make a square with a side length of 25. So see if you can use your calculator to figure that out. And also, what is the square root of 900? Square root meaning you're finding the side length. So the product is 900. What would be the length of each side? Try the challenge problems. They will be on the quiz later, but remember this quiz is just counting for completion. You don't actually get a quiz grade. All right, for the top of the back of the notes, remember, if anytime I'm going too fast, pause the video, write down what you need to write down, and then you can move on. They ask, what is the perfect square of a number? Again, the perfect square is the answer or product you get when you multiply a number times itself. So let's try some. You're going to see these little tiny 2's. That does not mean 1 times 2. That means there are 2 number 1's being multiplied by themselves, or by together. So this is 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. Oops, sorry. Skip all the way to the end, because I said that you had to know from 1 to 20 squared, or 20 times 20. So at the very end, you have to know between 1 and 400 for your perfect squares. Now let's jump back to the 3's. 3 squared, or 3 times 3, is 9. 4 squared, or 4 times 4, is 16. 5 squared, or 5 times 5, is 25. 6 squared is the same as 6 times 6, which is 36. And we did all of these examples on the front page of your notes. 7 squared is 7 times 7, and that is 49. 8 squared, we did together. That was in the little box. 8 times 8 is 64. That was that funny little saying. 9 squared, is 9 times 9, and that is 81. 10 squared, or 10 times 10, is 100. Now we're getting into numbers that you probably haven't seen before. And you will have to eventually know these. You can use your calculator for this section of the SOL and on your test, but it helps too if you get familiar with them so you can recognize them and not always have to go to your calculator. 11 squared, or 11 times 11, is 121. 12 squared, or 12 times 12, is 144. 13 squared, or 13 times 13, is 169. 14 squared, or 14 times 14, is 196. And these are easy because 13 and 14 have the exact same numbers. The only difference is the last two numbers change places. 15 times 15, or 15 squared, would be 225. 16 squared, or 16 times 16, is 256. 17 squared, or 17 times 17, is 289. 18 squared, or 18 times 18, is 324. And the last one you have to fill in is 19 squared, and that is 19 times 19, or 361. And remember, the perfect squares are the products or the answer you're getting. So those are really big numbers, and they get pretty big pretty fast. The inverse of squaring a number is the square root. So remember I said that perfect squares and square roots are the opposite or inverse of each other. The symbol we use to represent square root is this funny looking thing. It looks almost like division, but it's got a little foot coming off of it. That is called a square root symbol. And the square root symbol gives the root number, or the number that's being multiplied by itself, to find the perfect square. It is one of the two identical factors. So if we look at this example, 5 squared, or 5 to the second power, the perfect square is 25. And on the flip side, or the opposite of that, is if I said, what is the square root of 25? You're looking for the length of that side of the square, or the number that's being multiplied to get to 25. Last thing we're going to do, at the very bottom of your page, all you see here are the perfect squares, but they're under a square root symbol, which is telling us that we want to undo the perfect square and find the number being multiplied times itself. It looks like division, but remember you've got the little tiny foot coming off of it to the left. That tells you that it's square root, not division. So for the first example, the square root of 1 means what number am I multiplying times itself to get 1? And we know that 1 times 1 is 1. So that's pretty easy. The second example, we know that to get 4, you're going to multiply 2 times 2. And if you look back at the top of your paper, you can kind of to recognize the pattern. The square root of 9, what number is being multiplying times itself to get 9, and that is 3. I went ahead and clicked, sorry about that. We know that 4 times 4 is 16, so the square root of 16 is 4. What is the square root of 25? Is 5. The square root of 36 is 6. And you can see the pattern going on. Square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 64, remember the saying, I ate and I ate, so it is 8. And then 81, square root of 81 is 9. Square root of 100 is 10. The square root of 121 is 11. The square root of 144 is 12. The square root of 169 is 13. The square root of 196 is 14. The square root of 225 is 15. Square root of 256, 16. Square root of 289 is 17. The square root of 324 is 18. The square root of 361 is 19. And lastly, the square root of 400 is 20. It will help you if you memorize these items. Make flashcards. There's lots of apps on your phone or your devices that you can download that make free flashcards so you can quiz yourself. You don't have to memorize them because you do get a calculator, but it helps to have them memorized, as many as you can, moving forward. And now it's time to show what you know. You are going to go back to OneNote and either click on the link that is in OneNote to take the quiz, or use your phone or tablet or device to use the QR code to access the quiz that way. Either way will get you to the same place. You're going to take that quiz and show us what you understood from today's lesson.